Well, posting that video about Ghost earlier this month hasn't quelled my autistic hyperfixation at all, and it seems like people in the comments were interested in looking for a deeper analysis of these songs. While I'm not very musically inclined to be able to cover the construction of these songs, I can offhandedly mention these elements whilst I cover the one thing I am good at analysing: words. As a writer, I like looking into the meanings of lyrics in songs, and Ghost has some great ones. So, a new long-form writing project within the Spectrum Analysis series is born. Yes, welcome to Spectrum Analysis, a show where a neurodivergent no-lifer with an arts degree and nothing to use it on decides to cover his fixations so that the world has to be inflicted with his ramblings. On the altar today is Ghost, the Swedish black metal band. Now, people who know Ghost will chafe at my description of their genre there as simply black metal, and I'm right there with you, because unfortunately, decade vibes don't really count as genres yet. Ghost certainly started out as a black metal band, but have since wandered somewhat. Let's look at a song from their first album, Opus Eponymous, and compare it with their most recent album, Skeleta, which revealed yesterday. Much different. So what's the deal with Ghost? Well, Ghost, or previously known as Ghost BC until around 2015 for legal reasons, began life in 2009 with their demos and the eventual release of their first album, Opus Eponymous. The band centers around the frontman Tobias Forge playing a character on stage supported by a band of nameless ghouls. Since then, the ghouls have become characters in and of themselves, with the names of those under the masks becoming more well known, and supposedly them appearing unmasked in recent music videos. The anonymity of these instrumentalists being somewhat of a point of theory crafting in the fandom for a while, as people guess the identity of these band members to be famous guitarists and singers from other bands, such as Metallica's James Hetfield and Nirvana and Foo Fighters' Dave Grohl. Even to this day, Genius lists the producer of some of Ghost's songs as Dave Grohl, so there may be some truth to the myths, although potentially more behind the scenes than actually playing a nameless ghoul. The involvement of James Hetfield isn't exactly speculation either, as he was heavily invested in the band in the early years of their history. Videos began circulating of him attending their concerts, and eventually Ghost was headlining at Metallica gigs. This was the first time I saw them live, alongside a little-known band known as Bokassa, who are so little-known that they sell these t-shirts at the gig that I was at, which is honestly hilarious. It's a well-known fact that the investment of Metallica into Ghost propelled them into the limelight and put them more securely on the map than they had been before. After seeing them live with Metallica, my family and I attended a gig of theirs which introduced me to bands that I still listen to today, Tribulations and All Them Witches. The latter of which I listen to in my spare time more, and the solo career of one of the former band members has been closely followed by my sister and mother. But we'd been aware of Ghost for a while, even before seeing them live with Metallica, so you can imagine that seeing them with Metallica together was a mind-blowing experience, considering that my mum had grown up with Metallica. She'd been a fan of them since the band were younger than I am, and then she pushed that love on to all of us. My first introduction to Ghost was similar to many bands that I'm very invested in these days, a simple quirk of the YouTube algorithm and an eye-catching thumbnail. The song Square Hammer caught my attention in the algorithm's recommended tab, and I became obsessed. I introduced them to my family, and after a lukewarm reception, they slowly listened to this song over and over again, and investigated their other tracks and became hooked. Except for my stepdad, but, you know. Like I said, Ghost is led by Tobias Forge, but on stage he plays a character. Alongside his nameless ghouls, Forge buries himself under layers of silicon Mission Impossible masks, and pretends to be the head priest of the Church of Satan. When I was a kid, I attended a Church of England school, and there was a local priest named Gary, who had a Christian band, that came around the school once in a while to play a few little mini concerts in the hall. I remember him being surprisingly cool and chill, and his music being really good and not at all really preachy. It was just decent music, which was a big contrast from, actually going to a Church of England school, beginning and ending every assembly with a prayer, and having to sing some kind of hymn halfway through. I'm sure you've encountered something similar to my friend Gary, especially in America. Perhaps a Sunday school priest who had a rock band, or a teacher would pull out an acoustic guitar to sing about Jesus. Jesus is a friend of mine. I'm pretty sure even David Koresh of, the Waco Siege fame had his own Christian rock band, and it wasn't like, overtly singing about Jesus, just like pop songs of the day. Imagine that sort of arrangement of a, local church rock band, but for the devil. And that's what the setup of Ghost is. Let's look a little bit deeper into the lore of this band, and yes, they have lore. It's not a modern synth metal band without lore, characters, and religion. I'm looking at you, Sleep Token. In reality, Ghost began in 2009, in Sweden, with Tobias Forge playing Papa Emeritus I. But in the Ghost ARG alternate reality timeline, the band began in the 60s. Forge has stated that the sound of the band was meant to evoke a group from the 60s to the 80s that everyone liked but that you missed out on. And the lore takes this a bit more literally. The first frontman was known as Papa Niall, otherwise known as Papa Zero. He was a free agent of peace and love in the crazy 60s hippie milieu, but he was also a Satanist. I don't know if he started this branch of the church, but he started the band as a way to get the bad word out to the masses. He released songs that would eventually be re-released, quote-unquote, under the 7 Inches of Satanic Panic album later in the band's life. These include hits you may know from TikTok like Mary on a Cross and Kiss the Go-Goat, eventually including The Future is a Foreign Land. The head nun of this church was Niall's lover, who we only know as Sister Imperator, a jealous woman despite Niall's and the church's opinion on free love. Niall also had 3 kids with another woman despite Sister Imperator's jealousy, who eventually took on the mantle as Papa once Niall grew too old to take the reins of the band. These being Papa Emeritus 1, 2, and 3, respectively. 1 and 2 were very similar in their approach to the band, reflecting the band's style at the time, but after the release of Meliora, the tone shifted, reflected in Papa E3's distinct 1920s style. Finally, the greatest shift came with the reveal of the newest frontman, who took the mantle by force, with a secretive assassination of the 3 past frontmen, and then selling their death masks as merchandise. This young scamp, taking the reins before he was even consecrated as the top dog, was Cardinal Copia, marking the band's biggest switch-up in tone and aesthetic. This was during the reveal of the Prequel album, and at this time they began publishing a sitcom on YouTube. Imagine if Beelzebubs or the Osbournes were trying to advertise you a rock concert with every episode. God, I really hope that that's one internet comic that hasn't been revealed to be tied to a psychopath. I tend to dread looking up these things anymore. Through this sitcom, we learn that Cardinal Copia is the son of Niall and Imperator, and as a result, he's one of the candidates for the Antichrist. Presumably so are the other papas, I guess. Of course, much like any period in the band's history, they don't exactly take this whole thing very seriously. In the show, we also meet a priest of the order named Saltarian, who will come back later. But around this introduction, we see that Niall dies of old age, although that doesn't exactly stop him from showing up in the show and the concerts. When I saw them live, Niall was wheeled out in a chair and then shredded a crazy sax solo during Miasma, before collapsing back into the chair and huffing an oxygen tank. In later shows, he was wheeled out in a glass coffin, and his spirit presumably re-inhabited his body for the same sax solo before he fell back into his coffin. It's honestly a great bit of stagecraft. Shortly after Niall's death, Cardinal Copia was ordained live in concert as Papa Emeritus IV, right in time for the Impera album reveal. You're seeing a pattern here. However, in the sitcom, another glass coffin was being prepared at the church, and shortly thereafter Sister Imperator died too, leaving Cardinal Copia as Vater Imperator, and requiring him to take over the church and find a new frontman for the band, much to his chagrin. Here we get the reveal of the priest seen earlier being the adoptive father of Copia, and his adoptive mother being Mrs. Saltarian, his aunt and the sister of Papa Nile. But Copia wasn't the only son of Nile and Imperator, as he had a twin. Thus enters the seemingly true Antichrist and current frontman Papa Emeritus V, Perpetua. Judging from the name, they may stick with this one for a while, and seeing as it's the first time that Tobias Forge has gone without a face-altering rubber mask, I feel that this obfuscation and flip-flopping may be over for a change. And yes, as I said before, all of the previous singers were actually the same person, just wearing a latex mask. You can only imagine how it restricted his singing and warmed him up on stage. As for the ghouls, they used to go by alchemical symbols or elements until their numbers grew too numerous. Then around prequel, they just started adding even more people, like the ghoulettes. While we know a lot more about them now, I'll leave their identities up to people in the comments, or Google if you're that curious. That's kind of all there is to talk about when it comes to the background of the band. They're deeply unserious, and even though they're envoys of Satan himself, they kind of treat the whole devil worship thing as more of a... what's the word I'm looking for here? A rejection of organized religion, or at least a rejection of Christianity, Catholicism, all of the denominations of Christianity. Personally, I get the feeling that this is why there are so many fans of Ghost that are in some way Hispanic. This is just another one of those things that I'm connecting the dots of. This is the entire reason why I named the previous video the Ghost Conspiracy Board, because I'm connecting dots. I'm not trying to make some kind of big world-altering statement. I haven't found the secret of Ghost. In that video, I was just saying, oh, it seems like the band kind of likes this structure of music. That was all I was saying. It was a joke by saying Conspiracy Board. This is another kind of picking up dots where maybe there aren't any, but if I'm going to literally record my screen, pick a random Ghost video, scroll down to the comments and see how long it takes me to find a comment in Spanish, a comment that mentions South or Central America, or anything to that effect, and I will probably not have to scroll for very long. In fact, this sentence may be longer than that clip is. I don't know. But I get the feeling that because Central and South America and Spain and, a lot of the Spanish-speaking countries are heavily Catholic, it may be a sort of rebellion against such old-world ideas that has led a lot of people to loving Ghost. That's my theory, but there are certainly a lot of Hispanic fans for some reason. In fact, I actually have some comments on my video in Spanish, so if I know I got quite a few views on that video, but my channel isn't huge, so if I can get a lot of Spanish-speaking comments on the video, then it's probably likely they have a lot of Spanish-speaking fans, and I get the feeling that that's why. As a result of it being more framed as a rebellion against the hypocrisy of the Catholic Church, or in general the hypocrisy of usual religion, and embracing the carnal and fairly natural emotions and impulses of the human body, that is kind of more where their Satanism sits than, actually trying to summon the devil. Like, yeah, they talk about the fact that they're trying to summon the Antichrist and stuff like that in the early albums especially. But recently it's become a lot more about, for example, Impera was entirely about admonishing the cycle of empires. Prequel was about an oncoming, awful, world-ending disease, which we're not going to touch the implications of. And the most recent one, Skeletor, seems to be more personal about, individual feelings and about romantic subplots and such like that. They haven't really been singing all that much about the devil, and if they do, it's usually as a sort of metaphor for the inherent, overwhelming emotions of the human condition. Hence we get songs like Satanized, for instance. Through a life of devotion. But we'll get into that. Because yes, I'm going to go through every single album in chronological order, every single song in those albums, including the instrumentals, although excluding the covers from other bands, and I am going to go through all the lyrics, offhandedly mention some of the musical construction that I can, find words for, and generally go over everything. And yes, that includes my beloved Square Hammer, which I will put in the Meliora video, despite the various protestations of people in the last video that Meliora was not the album that Square Hammer was on. Yes, I understand that Square Hammer first appeared on the Popestar EP, but if I'm removing all covers from other bands, then Square Hammer is the only song on Popestar EP that's by Ghost, and then they rolled it into the Meliora Deluxe Edition anyway, so it is on a Meliora album. That's enough for me. I'm autistic. I thought I was pedantic. The comments were more so. Then again, these were also the same people who thought that I was Ghost must be the first band that bro listened to. I understand that bands have themes, I wasn't exactly saying otherwise. My last video was just pointing out a cool structural thing. I wasn't trying to discover the inherent secret of Ghost. I wasn't trying to decode something. It's just, I noticed this, I thought it was cool, and also, I've noticed it in 2 other songs since I released that video, so you bet your backside I'm going to be mentioning it in those videos. But, like I said, I'm going to go through chronologically, starting with Opus Eponymous, and working my way up through Infestisumam. Why did I go for a Swedish... Infestisumam up to Meliora, then through Prequel and Impera, and then Skeletor, since it was released yesterday. Yay! And yes, I have listened to the whole thing already. It rocks. Go listen to it. It's it's if Impera was kind of just starting to brush against the 80s vibes, Skeletor is fully embraced in it. They sound like Journey, they sound like John Carpenter. It's amazing, I love it. Either way, I'm going through all of them, starting with Opus Eponymous. It's going to be a little bit rough because personally I don't like too many songs from Opus Eponymous. It's actually the one Ghost album where I don't like every single song on the album, so I'm going to have to be very generous with it. But yes, every single album will have its own video. Every single song will have its own segment in the video. I will go through all the lyrics and some of the musical construction and talk about it. And if you want to be there for all of those videos, then please subscribe. This is kind of the first time I've ever asked people to subscribe, but, I've got Opus Eponymous, Infestisumam, Meliora, Prequel, Impera. I have 6 new videos coming up, all in the same thing. So, the first time that I had 6 videos in a playlist, people really wanted to see the next ones. So subscribe, because then you'll be able to see when I post a new one. And I'm going to try and get them out fairly quickly, because I have kind of been lax on the content on this channel recently. So, if you're interested in that, subscribe. Maybe give the videos a like if you like them. Maybe comment if you have any opinions on the analysis that I have, and maybe if I've missed something. All that YouTube stuff. And I do hope you enjoy, because I'm certainly going to enjoy it. And I'll see you guys in those videos.